women like me,
Yeah.
who have lived like men.
Knew what you wanted.
Well,
went out
I
and
knew
got
that
it.
I was brought up in a big family, and I was brought up great.
Critics labelled her too masculine and claimed her on-screen sexual chemistry with men fell flat. But Katharine Hepburn's personal life was far more complex. At George Cukor's exclusive, often gay parties, she formed an intimate bond with bisexual actress Elissa Landi. And with close ties to socialite Laura Harding and Greta Garbo, Hepburn's life was shrouded in secrets. In later years, startling revelations about her sexuality would astonish even those who knew her best. As a child, Katharine disliked being a girl. She chose instead to spend time with the boys and made a decision that would set the tone for her entire life. She chopped off her hair and insisted everyone call her Jimmy. Instead of trying to change her, Hepburn's parents celebrated her authentic self, unknowingly nurturing a future Hollywood rebel. Katharine Hepburn was destined to challenge every norm she encountered. Her mother, a member of the Connecticut Women's Suffrage Association, often took young Katharine to demonstrations. But it wasn't just her mother's influence that shaped Hepburn's rebellious nature. Tragedy struck when Katharine was just 13 years old. During an Easter break trip to New York with her older brother Tom, Hepburn made a horrifying discovery. She found her 15-year-old brother dead, apparently having taken his own life. The loss devastated her, and her family's reaction was equally disturbing. They refused to admit that Tom had made this heart-wrenching decision, insisting instead that it must have been a botched experiment. This traumatic event left an indelible mark on Hepburn. She became more anxious and distrustful of others, a trait that would follow her throughout her life and career. Years later, she would reveal that she had changed her birth date to her brother's, making herself appear 2 years older, a secret she kept until the publication of her autobiography. As Hepburn entered college, her rebellious nature truly blossomed. At one point, she stripped naked and bathed in the cloister pond and got suspended for smoking in her dorm. However, this is where she became interested in theatre, joining the drama group. It was here that she first played a man on stage, a look she would often adopt offstage as well. When Hepburn decided to pursue acting as a career, her father was skeptical. But the headstrong Hepburn forged ahead, determined to prove him wrong. Her journey to stardom wasn't smooth sailing, though. She stumbled and fumbled, getting fired from multiple theatre companies. But Hepburn wasn't one to give up easily. In 1932, she finally got her big break on Broadway in The Warrior's Husband. Her performance caught the eye of a Hollywood scout, and before she knew it, Hepburn was at RKO Studios for a screen test. But even as a newcomer, Hepburn showed her mettle. She demanded $1,500 a week, an unheard of sum for an unknown actress. Hepburn's debut film, A Bill of Divorcement, was a hit, and critics were struck by her natural talent.
I'd hate myself for cheating you. Besides, you think I could be with you and not want children, not long for them? Your children, kid.
But dear, we'd be together.
Oh, kid, don't.
At the preview of that movie, the audience was shuffling in their seats, unsure what to make of her. Then came a moment when the camera was just on her, not talking or doing anything. She threw pillows down on the ground and stretched out like a panther after eating its prey. That was the very moment she became a star. No one had ever seen anyone do anything like that before. Within 2 years, she had won her first Oscar for Morning Glory. At 25 years old, after only 3 films, Hepburn was propelled to the rank of star. But Hollywood wasn't just about the glitz and glamour. Behind closed doors, Hepburn found herself embroiled in scandals and tumultuous relationships. Hepburn had married young to a childhood friend, but it was more of an arranged marriage than a real one. She divorced secretly in the early 1930s, wanting to devote her increasingly precious energy to building not a family, but a career in Hollywood. Hepburn's first marriage to Ludlow Ogden Smith, a socialite businessman, was unconventional from the start. They met while she was in college, and their union seemed more of a matter of convenience than passion. Hepburn later admitted, "I was a pig. I insisted on being married in the West Avenue Congregational Church in Hartford, where my grandparents had been married. And then I left for California, leaving him to get back as best he could. The marriage was doomed from the beginning. Hepburn was far more interested in pursuing her acting career than in being a traditional wife. She often used Smith's wealth and connections to further her ambitions, leaving him feeling used and neglected. Despite his devotion to her, Hepburn never fully reciprocated his affections. Their relationship became strained as Hepburn's star began to rise in Hollywood. She was rarely home, and when she was, her focus remained on her career. Smith, who had moved to California to be closer to his wife, found himself increasingly isolated and unhappy. The marriage lasted only 6 years, from 1928 to 1934, with Hepburn later saying, "I honestly don't know what I was thinking. I never should have married him." The divorce was kept secret for several years, partly to protect Hepburn's image and partly because she felt guilty about how she had treated Smith. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she once said, "I was a terrible pig in a way. But I was right. He was wrong. I wanted a career, and I was right to want a career." After her divorce, Hepburn found herself entangled with one of the most enigmatic figures in American history, Howard Hughes. Their relationship was as complex and unconventional as Hepburn herself. Hughes, the millionaire aviator and film producer, was fascinated by Hepburn's independence and spirit. Their affair began in 1935 and lasted for several years. Hughes, with his vast wealth and shared love of adventure, seemed like the perfect match for Hepburn. They would often fly together, with Hughes piloting his latest aircraft designs. Hepburn later recalled, "He was the best pilot I've ever known. Flying with Howard was like flying with God." However, their relationship was far from perfect. Hughes was notoriously controlling and eccentric, traits that clashed with Hepburn's fiercely independent nature. He would often disappear for days or weeks at a time, leaving Hepburn in the dark about his whereabouts or activities. Despite these challenges, Hepburn found herself drawn to Hughes' brilliance and ambition. She once said, "He was the most fascinating man I've ever known. I liked him because he was totally crazy." Hughes introduced her to the world of aviation, a passion that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Their relationship reached a turning point in 1938, when Hughes took Hepburn to meet his family in Houston. The visit was a disaster. Hughes' conservative Texas relatives were shocked by Hepburn's outspoken nature and unconventional dress. Hepburn, in turn, was put off by what she perceived as their narrow-mindedness. The final straw came when Hughes proposed marriage. Hepburn, still scarred from her first marriage and fiercely protective of her independence, turned him down. She later explained, "I knew I could never be what he wanted me to be. He needed someone who would devote themselves entirely to him, and that just wasn't me." The end of their relationship left Hepburn feeling both relieved and somewhat bereft. Hughes had been a significant part of her life for years, and his absence left a void. However, it also reinforced her belief that she was not meant for traditional relationships. These experiences with Smith and Hughes profoundly shaped Hepburn's views on love and marriage. She became even more convinced that her career should always come first, and that she was not suited for conventional relationships. This attitude would influence her future romantic entanglements, including her long-term relationship with Spencer Tracy. Hepburn's life with Hughes also left her with a lasting appreciation for risk-taking and adventure, traits that would continue to define both her personal life and her career choices. She never lost her love for flying, often piloting her own planes in later years. In reflecting on these relationships later in life, Hepburn remained characteristically blunt. "I was never meant to be a traditional wife," she said. "My experiences with Ludlow and Howard taught me that. I needed to be free to be myself, to pursue my dreams. And in the end, that's exactly what I did." Her unconventional behavior began to ruffle feathers. She wore pants when it was considered scandalous for women to do so, and her tomboyish attitude drew harsh criticism. Hepburn didn't care for the separation between men and women, believing it to be ridiculous. She thought women could be as bold as they wanted to be, and men could be as stubborn as they wanted to be. In 1936, director George Cukor took into account Hepburn's boyish side in Sylvia Scarlett, offering her the part of a pickpocket who disguises herself as a man to escape the police. For the 1936 audience, it was pure provocation. Hepburn's popularity with sophisticated, intelligent audiences grew, but she annoyed the mainstream. The press dubbed her Catherine of Arrogance, and by 1938, she was labeled box office poison after starring in 4 consecutive flops. But Hepburn wasn't about to let Hollywood dictate her fate. She took a bold and risky move that would change the course of her career.
George, I'm going to.
Hepburn purchased the film rights to Philadelphia Story, a play written with her in mind. She negotiated with MGM to produce the film, ensuring she would star in the lead role and have a say in the production. Her gamble paid off spectacularly. The film was a massive success, reviving her career and solidifying her reputation as one of Hollywood's most formidable actresses. Throughout her career, Hepburn continued to challenge societal norms. She became an avid golfer when it was still considered a man's sport, quickly mastering the game and reaching the semi-finals of the Connecticut Young Women's Golf Championship. She fought against typecasting in Hollywood and refused to behave as women of that time were expected to, quiet and demure. Hepburn's personal life was as unconventional as her career, and perhaps the most significant relationship in her life was with Spencer Tracy. Their on-screen chemistry captivated audiences, but their off-screen romance was far more complicated. Tracy was a married man, and his Catholic guilt over their affair fed his growing demons. He battled anxiety, depression, and addiction, with Hepburn often acting as a maternal figure in his life. But this relationship would later come into question as something of a facade for both. For decades, Hepburn devoted large chunks of her time to helping Tracy with his insomnia and drinking. She even stepped away from acting for 5 years to care for him when his health rapidly declined in the 1960s. They returned to the screen for the 9th and final film together, 1967's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Tracy died just 17 days after filming wrapped, with Hepburn by his side. Respecting the sanctity of their secret, Hepburn didn't even attend Tracy's funeral. It wasn't until after Tracy's wife Louise died in 1983 that Hepburn finally revealed the truth about their relationship. But while this infamous Hollywood love story seemed straightforward, some believed there were secrets hidden beneath the surface. Throughout her life, Hepburn faced criticism about her boyish looks, fashion sense, and masculine attitude. She had no real interest in marriage or babies, leading to speculation about her sexuality. When Hepburn first arrived in Los Angeles, she moved to Hollywood with her best friend living with her for her first years in the industry. She would sometimes pick up the phone and say, "This is Katharine Hepburn's husband," causing people to laugh. They did not try to hide the fact that they appeared to be a couple, presenting themselves as married. However, they did not consider themselves to be lesbians, associating the term exclusively with women who adopted a more masculine style. As Hepburn aged, she changed in many ways. She began to open up a bit more to the press, even gracing Dick Cavett with a delightful 2-hour interview in 1973. Her opinionated nature never waned, and she certainly didn't mind if her views ruffled some feathers. She proudly advocated for birth control and abortion rights, and in a Hollywood where God always gets a shout-out, Hepburn had no problem declaring herself a proud atheist. In 1973, Hepburn was reunited with one of her supposed flames, John Ford. Ford's grandson was writing a book about him and arranged a meeting between the two. He recorded their conversation and got more than he bargained for. When he left to grab something from his car, he left the tapes rolling. Unaware that they were still being recorded, Ford told Hepburn that he loved her, and she responded that it was mutual.
I love you.
It's mutual.
Thank you.
It's thrilling to see you.
Oh, good.
Even into her 80s, Katharine Hepburn was a force to be reckoned with. Her athleticism didn't cease with her old age, and she continued to play tennis almost daily. She even discovered new hobbies like painting. But when it came to spilling old secrets, Hepburn wasn't finished yet. In the spring of 1993, Hepburn's health finally took a hit. Up until then, she continued to act, but after being hospitalized for exhaustion, her decline began in earnest. 3 years later, pneumonia came for her in a brutal way, and by 1997, the outlook was bleak. She held on for 6 more years, struggling with dementia. In 2003, at the age of 96, Katharine Hepburn passed away from cardiac arrest in her family home in Fenwick, Connecticut. But even in death, she left us with one last bombshell. In her final years, Hepburn hinted at a truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Her lifelong insistence on being called Jimmy, her preference for masculine clothing, and her resistance to traditional female roles. All of these pointed to a startling possibility. However, it was James Robert Parish's biography that made the strongest case that Katharine Hepburn was a lesbian. Yet, it also raised another intriguing question. Could her deep connections to bisexual and gay women in the industry reflect a hidden desire to be a transgender man?